Welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. We're going to talk about what happened last weekend, Easter weekend 2017, April 14th through the 16th. I guess it's not really like a holiday. It's a holiday weekend, but there's no like extra day tacked on. I guess Good Friday technically counts as a holiday. We used to get off school for that. I don't think it's a federal holiday though. In any event, it's not really, you know what? That's not true. I take that back because I read somewhere that like 70% of people are off school then. So maybe we can't, let's treat it like a holiday weekend. It just feels different. It doesn't feel like 4th of July for some reason. Or anything like that. It just kind of feels, I guess people travel a lot on Good Friday and this weekend, so it feels a little bit more deflated than a normal holiday weekend. In any event, the number one movie, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the top 10. I'm going to riff on that a bit, talk about what did well, what didn't do well, and then kind of go in depth as we go along into sort of different concepts about the box office and why things are doing well and why some movies are not performing up to expectations. So number one last weekend was The Fate of the Furious, which I will now call F8 moving forward on this podcast because I'm not going to say Fate of the Furious or Furious 8, if you will. I guess Furious 8 works because the last one was Furious 7. I've been calling it Furious 8 for like the last year. In any event, The Fate of the Furious did 98.7 or $98.8 million last weekend. Now, you might notice that if you were looking at the news on Sunday, you probably heard that it did over $100 million, just over $100 million. That was Universal bullshitting. I've never seen a more clear case of a movie not going to hit its estimated Sunday predictions. Universal basically wanted the headline to be on Sunday and Monday that Fate of the Furious F8, Furious 8, if you will, did over $100 million because the fact that it didn't is pretty embarrassing, I would say. And, you know, I think the gut reaction to that sub 100 number is what the fuck happened? Like, so the last movie, Furious 7, you know, opened at an outrageous $147 million its opening weekend, which was just sort of, let's say, outrageous, I guess. No one really thought that it was going to do that well. I think, you know, obviously the death of Paul Walker, people felt like it was going to be a send-off to the original sort of cast and the original crew. But 147 was just nuts. I mean, because Fast and Furious 6, which opened up in May of 2013, only did 97. I say only 97. That's huge, right? These are blockbuster level numbers. I'm not trying to say that, you know, Fast and the Furious 8 here, I'm not trying to say that it was a flop in the traditional sense, but it was clearly well below expectations for this film. And so Furious 8 essentially dropped back down to the Fast and the Furious 6 number of the high 90s, right? It's nowhere near Furious 7, which opened at 147, ended up at $353 million domestically. And I think like $1.5 billion overall worldwide. A huge movie. Deadline said Furious 7 made $250 million in pure profit. That's pure profit. Kind of just an amazing run for that film. So you have that context here. You know, F6 did really well. F7 was a huge bump for the entire series. And when we look at that, you're like, okay. So Fate of the Furious did 98.7. That's not terrible. The issue here is that because it's the 8th sequel in this film series, what ends up happening is that multipliers, that is the amount that the movie makes X its opening weekend, usually like a 2 to 3X number, it's going to get lower and lower for this series. And Furious 7 actually had a pretty low multiplier of about 2.4. Actually, now I have to figure out exactly what it was. 2.4 exactly. So if Fate of the Furious does that, you know, you're looking at 98.7 times the 2.4 you're not going to get into the zone that you want to be, right? Like, I think they wanted this to be well over 250. With that multiplier, you're looking at 236, 237. That's sub 240. Now, see, this is where the movie industry gets really fascinating and the number side gets fascinating. And I wish I had a better handling of basic statistics and math theory, I guess you'd call it. But what's happening here is the fact that it opens so much lower than Furious 7, it's going to end up being, at the end of the day, it's about going to match what Fast and the Furious 6 did at 238, 240. When you extrapolate that over weeks and weeks and months, you're talking a shortfall of $120-ish million, $110 million difference between Furious 7 and Furious 8. That's massive. That's a massive difference. And I don't care what anybody says about this Furious 7 being special. There is no way that Universal felt going into this weekend that this movie was going to be over 100 million less in total take than Furious 7. They have profit models, they have revenue baked in already for this entire year, what things are expected to do. And I'm telling you right now, the Fast and the Furious is not hitting those expectations. So I'm definitely not going to call it a flop. I'm going to call it a disappointment, at least domestically. Now, you probably saw, if you follow this, there's been a ton of articles about the Fate of the Furious doing so well internationally. And it's already at $544 million internationally. 480% of that is foreign. So it's essentially $437 million made overseas so far, which is outrageously big. It's huge, right? Now, so they're going to bring that, a lot of people are going to bring that up and say, well, it had the biggest international opening ever. Yeah, okay, I guess. I mean, that's a cool stat, but the one thing that no one's been able to show me is how many markets did it open on and how many theaters did it open on internationally. Now compare that to other movies. And if that's the case, if it was on the same amount of screens as Star Wars Force Awakens when it opened, and they both, and Fate of the Furious did better, okay, it did better. That doesn't make any sense for a couple of reasons. One, it opened sub $100 million in the United States. It's not like the United States dictates every other market, but there is a correlation there. Now, look, Fate of the Furious is a big international property, obviously. And I'm not trying to take away from it. I just think people need to put things in context, right? Because a lot of the news and buzz coming out of yesterday was, oh my God, the Fate of the Furious has a record international worldwide opening weekend. That's what it says here on the top story in Box Office Mojo for it. And we, if you put it in context, yeah, it's done very well. But especially here in the United States, it has underperformed expectations pretty significantly. And you kind of have to wonder, what's up for the next couple of movies, because I believe they have 9 and 10 slated to come out. And, I wonder if they're going to lower, my guess is they're going to start lowering those production budgets, because the production budget for Fate of the Furious was $250. And the participation, the amount of money that Vin Diesel and all the other people are getting definitely has gone way up since probably even 7. So they're spending a lot more money to make these films, and starting with Furious 8, they're getting a significantly less amount back. Even if it does overperform internationally, we have to remember, and people are going on about the Chinese numbers here, they're only going to get 25% of that Chinese revenue, despite the fact that they partnered with a couple Chinese companies here, which apparently is why someone was saying online rumors that it was in 90% of theaters or something in China. I don't know. Basically what happened is they have a partnership with a Chinese distribution company, or a couple of them, and they flooded the market with this film, which is why it's doing so well. I don't think they're going to get even 50% of that revenue. It's probably going to be the traditional 25%. So, the international stuff is great, but there's a less of a return for the studio on the international box office as compared to the domestically. And I know I kind of sound like a hater of this film, and I'm not. I just think from a business perspective, that domestic number is pretty low. And it suggests that this series has hit its peak and that it's time to start winding it down. Fast and the Furious 9 is going to come out then 2019. Fast and Furious 10 is slated for 2021. My guess is they do get to the 10th one, but by then it will be as dead as a doornail, because this pattern right now suggests that it's never going to be the same as Furious 7. Like, Furious 7 was really probably the goodbye film for this whole crew. And I think these next few movies are going to be, I think they're going to be rough. And everything I've heard about Fate of the Furious is that it was pretty absurd in terms of the action. I heard it was fun. I heard it was kind of interesting, but at the end of the day, kind of a throwaway action film. And that's not going to get butts in the seats in 2 years anymore. It's just, if they keep retreading the same stuff over and over again, people aren't going to show up. And that's already been happening with this version or this installment of the Fast and Furious series. 98.7 million overall for the weekend. It was on 4,300 screens, which is a massive opening. Gotta be one of the top openings of all time. Its per screen average was a great basically $23,000. So, if you took it out of context in terms of like what I just said, wow, that's really good. Like, this is a really good opening. The problem here is the costs associated with releasing Fate of the Furious are so high. At the end of the day, when I do my calculations, and I've already done this for this film a couple of times, just as like getting in like flame wars online with people who are basically saying, oh, it's going to be huge profit for Universal. I don't necessarily doubt that it's going to be profitable. I do doubt that it's going to come anywhere near the profit that Furious 7 had of $250 million in profit. I don't think it's going to come anywhere close to that. And like, is it going to be a push? Maybe. I'm thinking probably 100 to less than 100 million in profit. So I think it definitely will probably get to be profitable. But if I'm being really honest, and I don't want to hedge my bets, I think it's kind of a push at the end of the day. And I think that it'll break even and maybe make a few million in profit, but not a ton. If anything, the international audience and the international box office will save it here. If this was just domestic and I just based this off the domestic number and extrapolate that out, I'd be like, wow, like they might lose a little bit of money here, but I think the international box office will actually save it to some degree, but not by much. So that's Fate and the Furious. I think the series has hit its peak and it's going downhill from now. $98 million is nothing to scoff at, but relatively to what the series has been doing and the money spent to make this film, it does seem a lot lower than it should be. This should have easily broken 100 million. Going into this like a month ago, I was thinking, at least 130, 140, right? Like maybe even up to 150, maybe up into like the Batman vs Superman number. But for whatever reason, this movie just did not connect with people in that way. So that was number one, Fate of the Furious this weekend. Number two was The Boss Baby at 16 million. A decent 40% drop, lost about 100 theaters. Its per theater average is at about $4,300. Its total take so far is 116 million bucks. It's in its third weekend. What's there to say about Boss Baby besides the fact that it's overperformed? I think any animated film like this from a big studio like Fox, you think is going to do decently well. This thing opened at 50 million, and I think that surprised everybody. I think I was looking at like mid-20s, maybe. A good opening I thought would have been in the 30s. The fact that it did 50 is it's fascinating because the movie didn't seem to be that interesting. It didn't seem to have that much of a unique voice to it. But people, I guess, were either bored or maybe, I don't know why people went to go see this. Now, the trailer was done very well. And the idea of this Boss Baby essentially was like a Donald Trump type character as a little kid being voiced by Donald Trump himself, Alec Baldwin. So I think that had a lot, like I thought that was going to play against it, but I think it played for it for whatever reason. And people just really wanted to see it. But a great performance by the Boss Baby overall. Number three was Beauty and the Beast, 13.7 million. Great 42% drop, even though it lost about 400 theaters. Its per theater average is a very healthy 3,800 on its fifth weekend. Total take so far, $454 million. I think Beauty and the Beast in general has been the big winner so far this year. I think it's the number one grossing film. It must be. I think, did it overperform? Going into it, people thought it was going to be huge, like massively huge. And I think that it got close to that. Its multiplier is going to be great. They released a singing version of it, I think, last weekend, so that's going to keep it kind of going on for a little bit longer. I don't know. There's something about the Beauty and the Beast phenomenon that I just don't get. So I'm reluctant to heap praise on it, as you can probably tell in the tone of my voice as I'm talking about the film. Something just felt a little bit off with it. I know the quality was pretty suspect based on the critical appraisal of it. Audiences seem to like it. And I think, though, what's going to happen and what I'm sort of feeling is that because Beauty and the Beast did so well, Disney's going to throw a lot of money in these live action remakes. And I'm not sure they're going to play as well as this. I feel like it could be sort of like, what was it? Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. How that played so well when it came out, because it just felt really new. Obviously Johnny Depp was involved in that one. It also opened in March. Like, it has this sort of Disney March live action movie thing going on. And when the second one came out, it was way too late. Didn't make any sense. It did incredibly poor compared to the first one. My guess is that Disney, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Because everybody was so excited for this movie, and it became essentially a meme where everybody felt like they had to go see it or they were missing out. The problem there is that the actual quality of the film just doesn't match its box office take. And not to say that, like, that's always the case. Like, a great movie will do well. Look at Secret Life of Pets. I mean, I think that was a trash film, and it was like the number one most profitable film last year. But to every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction, right? The fact that the film didn't seem like it was great might end up hurting Disney in the long run, because they're not going to get any more mileage out of this series. Like, if they opened Beauty and the Beast 2 next year, I guarantee you it's not going to make, it might make 75% of what this one is going to do. There's going to be massive diminishing returns on it. And I wonder if the poor quality of Beauty and the Beast is going to hurt the live remakes like Lion King and Aladdin. Now, maybe not. Maybe I'm just completely full of shit and everybody's going to go see Lion King. Everybody's going to go see Aladdin. Even saying this, I think that might be the case. But it does sort of call into question the viability of multiplying those films and doing more of these than they were in the past. Like, if you did, I think there's a live action of Mulan. Like, how well is that going to do? I just don't see it. I mean, Little Mermaid would be an interesting live action remake. So Disney should be ecstatic about this. It's done fantastic. It's going to cross the 500 million mark. So a win, huge win internationally. I think it's done very well. Actually, I want to check what it's doing internationally right now. It's at over $1 billion internationally, $588 million in foreign box office. This will be one of the most profitable films of the year. Right now, it's probably going to be the most profitable movie of the year. I can't think of anything that's going to be bigger than this. Its budget was only 160. But we'll see. We'll see how this sort of middling quality of the film ends up affecting either further movies like this or sort of the Disney, and I guess sort of the Disney sphere of live action remakes. It may not affect it at all, but I think on some level it has to. But we'll see. In any event, this one's doing fantastic. Number 4, Smiths, The Lost Village, $6.7 million, 50% drop. Still on 3,600 screens, hasn't really dropped any of those. Per theater average is 1,800, which is not good. Total take so far is almost $25 million in its second weekend. This is a huge flop, just a massive flop. I don't know what happened with this, but Sony's kind of on the ropes and they're going to get sold, it sounds like, but no one really wants to buy them just because Sony has been a complete shit show since the hack, and they've never recovered and they never figured it out. They keep making huge mistakes, and I don't want to list all of them, but I mean, my God, look at the Ghostbusters fiasco last year. You took one of the, and I'm not just going on some like men's rights activist bullshit and like, oh, I was pissed off because women were in it. No, that's bullshit. It was a bad film, and it was, I don't know who led that production, but you had talented people, you had a great director, and it completely ended up being, it was one of the worst movies I've seen last year, just because it was just so tepid and so flat on every level. And you have all those talented people involved. I don't understand what happened, but Sony is just, it is an absolute mess, and they're not going to recover. They're going to get sold to somebody and gutted. I'm not sure what's going to happen to them, but Smurfs Lost Village is just another huge loss for them. They just don't seem to be know how to get their sea legs over there. So that was number 4, Smurfs Lost Village. Big flop on that one. Number 5 was Going in Style, 6.2 million, 47% drop. Added a few theaters. Its per theater average in its second weekend is $2,000, which is okay. Total take so far is 23 million. I thought this was going to do a lot better than this. This seemed like an easily over a $50 million movie. Zach Braff directing some of the best actors out there. And it just didn't connect with people, and I'm not really sure why. I blame the marketing. This is through Warner Brothers and New Line. The marketing was great 4 months ago when they first dropped the trailer. It was on like every movie I went to go see. And then about a month before it was opening, it just seemed like, wait, this is opening in April? Like, wait, how? Like, I thought this was like opening this summer. And about a week or two before, there was just complete radio silence. So they dropped the ball in the marketing here. I don't understand why. This could have easily made over $50-60 million at the box office. And now it's going to be, lucky to get anywhere close to that. So Going in Style, I'm not going to call it a flop. It's just sort of it's a disappointing run for this film, because I think there's a lot more potential here for it to do well. So that was number 5, Going in Style. Number 6 was Gifted. Here's another one, which I just do not understand what was happening. Right, so this is a Fox Searchlight film. I believe it's Mark Webb, the guy who did 500 Days of Summer. And I have to double check that. It's got Chris Evans, who's essentially a huge movie star now. I always have a hard time understanding that, because I just remember Chris Evans from early in his career, and I was like, oh, that guy's like, he's an attractive, really strong presence on the screen. As an actor, he's okay. I'm not going to say that he's a bad actor. He definitely is proficient in doing well on screen. He's not like an amazing thespian or anything like that. But I always kind of saw him as a little bit cookie cutter. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Chris Pine, and like people are going to like write me angry letters and shit for this. It doesn't seem like he's stuck out that much. But then he had the Captain America stuff, and now he's this big movie star. And so I think he's really come around as an actor. He's really earned sort of the good actor stamp of approval now, because he's really taken the hits and really put himself out there and sort of went through the blockbuster grinder, and is now doing this really cool small film by Mark Webb, who's a great director, who unfortunately, I feel bad for him, because Mark Webb did 500 Days of Summer, which is one of my favorite films. And it's, it came out, I'm talking like 8 years now. It came out in the summer of 2009. I remember walking out of that movie and be like, wow, that was good. Now, it wasn't like Her good or like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind good, which I think are some of the best films of the last 20 years, but it was definitely kind of up there, kind of inching into that zone. And then Mark Webb unfortunately got hit with, for him, he probably thought it was a great step up in his career. He did The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012, and then the sequel in 2014. And those are just, I've never seen them. But if I go on to like any website or forum and like you mention that stuff and people just like throw just the worst insults at those films. So he hit an iceberg essentially. And now he's back with this smaller film, Gifted, which had, I think, one of the better trailers I've seen in a long time. And so I thought, I believed in this movie so much when I saw the trailer. I was like, and it was really underpriced on Hollywood Stock Exchange. I was like, I'm all in on this. I'm all in on Gifted because it looked like just a great film. It obviously had that super indie touch to it with the music and the way it was shot. Everything was so light and the music was bouncy. It could have, it's almost felt like an indie movie from the mid 2000s by the numbers to some degree, but I don't know, for some reason I liked that. And not only did I like it, but it felt like it was playing against what was going on in the box office these days, because you have a ton of these huge massive movies coming out, a lot of them. Think about March, Kong, Power Rangers, and everything else, Beauty and the Beast. There's just this massive wave of films that are just huge blockbusters. I love this is like counter programming to that, but for whatever reason, Fox Searchlight decided to do a kind of limited release on its first weekend. I have to look at it. It only did 56 screens last weekend, which was its first weekend. It came out of the gate with a $8,000 per theater average. Now, in general, if you saw that on a wide release opening, you'd be like, wow, that's great. That's a really good opening. That's like, I don't know, like 20 something million dollars usually. But 8,000 on a 56 theater opening is not great. And then Fox Searchlight decided to add, do kind of mini wide release, if you will. They added 1,000 theaters to really push it out there. And it did 2,700 per theater this last weekend, which just also seems low to me. And I can't really figure out what happened here, because you do have a big movie star in Chris Evans. You do have a great trailer. You do have a cool concept that I think would connect with a lot of different people. It's probably not going to connect with teenage boys, but I feel like every other like quadrant would be interested in this film. And I can't quite figure out what happened with the marketing here, because I don't know, they didn't push the trailer that much. And just like Going in Style, I had no idea it was coming out in April. Like, I knew because of like Hollywood Stock Exchange and I followed this stuff. But if you had just asked me what the movie Gifted was and I didn't really follow this, I guarantee you most people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. What movie is that? Just because they didn't sink the money into the marketing the way they should have. This could have been not as big as Hidden Figures, but like it could have been that style of a movie, right? A very heartwarming, almost family picture that you can go and see with anybody, and it's just like nice, and it's like a relaxing kind of feel good movie. And there's no reason Gifted should make under $30 million. That doesn't make any sense. Like, it should be easily, I would say 40, maybe even 50. Like, it should be up there with Going in Style, but both of these movies, and Gifted especially, have just failed to take off. And the problem right now with Gifted is I'm looking at, $2,700 for its per theater average right now, and that's only 1,100 screens. If you pump this out to more, this thing's going to go sub 1,500 maybe, and then it's already lights out. And so, I kind of wonder what they did, what went wrong here. Was it just the marketing, that they didn't push out the trailer to that many people, they didn't push social media ads that much? I'm not sure. Or was it the way that released it, just doing it in 56 screens? It almost felt like they didn't believe in the movie enough, because why would you push it out in 56 screens like that? And are you trying to get like build word of mouth? Because if you're doing that, why don't you just have it run on 56 screens for like a month? Get the word out there in those cities. Hopefully you're playing in the right cities. Like a perfect city for Gifted would be like Atlanta to me. It's like the perfect city, big city, a little bit more conservative than other huge cities. You play it there and get the word out to people and get word of mouth going, and then expand to like 500, then expand to like 1,000, and see how it does there, because then you can slowly build the momentum, word of mouth momentum. Now it's done. It's over. Like, this isn't going anywhere. So I think Fox Searchlight and whoever did the distribution with them kind of failed this film, and it'll get a second life on VOD and streaming and TV and stuff. But there's no reason this shouldn't have done well in the theaters, and it just speaks to the disruption that is happening in the industry. I think a lot of movie companies and distribution companies are nervous, and they're not really sure what to push and what not to push, and that becomes a problem. Because without a huge marketing campaign before the movie comes out, no movie's going to do well. Like, it just doesn't work that way. It's like you can't sell a product unless you market it. It's just like basic business principles. And because of because the movie industry is so much an upheaval, and that makes them gun shy, because of them being gun shy, it ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they didn't push Gifted enough for it to succeed, and now it's failing, and now they think that like, oh, we can't make small movies anymore because they fail. Well, it failed because you weren't marketing it properly, not because people don't want to see those films. But to play as devil's advocate, one could argue, is there a place for a movie like Gifted anymore? Is there a place for these small indie films to play in the box office? You know, I could probably make a strong argument that they're not. But at the end of the day, they're selling a product, and this product looked great. You know, if this was a car ad, I'd be like, oh, that car looks dependable. It looks nice. It's like a really good advertisement, and that should get people in the door to buy it, right? Which is the same thing for a movie trailer. This trailer should have got people into the door to buy it. They just didn't market it appropriately. I could go on and on about this, but I think the bottom line is Gifted is way underperforming what it should be doing. It is a failure. It's going to make like less than $10 million or something like that. That's awful. And it's too bad, because it looked like a really, really good film. Number 7 this weekend was Get Out, 2.9 million, just a wonderful 26% drop. I love Get Out. I haven't seen it yet, but it's my favorite film of the year so far in terms of box office. Get Out will change, and I've ranted about Get Out so many times on this podcast, but I just want to say again, Get Out will change the game. It has already changed the game. It was made for $4.5 million. The marketing campaign was super tight, a lot of social media stuff. They just hit a huge grand slam. I believe it is the number one, now take out inflation, it is the number one grossing horror film, I believe, of all time. Throw out like 6 cents or something like that. I might be making that up because I heard that somewhere. In any event, Get Out's at $167 million. Horror films in general, especially over the last decade, 20 years, anything over 100 million is like their Hall of Fame number. If you get over $100 million as a pure kind of horror film, you are legendary. And this is hitting 167. It's not even really slowing down that much. It's still on 1,400 screens. I have no idea where it's going to end up. I don't know, 180. I don't think I can hit 200. I don't think that's going to happen. Because it's in its 8th weekend at the box office. Unbelievable. There's nothing even close in the top 20 besides Lego Batman movie that's been in the theaters that long. So Get Out is a huge winner. I'm happy to see it do this well. And I'm really fascinated to see how its success is going to change not only just all movies, but specifically the horror genre. Like, this is like a Scream type event. Like, this is a Halloween type event. Like, I do not think the horror genre will be the same after this. I'm excited to see what happens. Number 8 was Power Rangers, 2.8 million. Pretty terrible 55% drop. That's probably because it lost 800 screens. Per theater average is an anemic 1,300 on its 4th weekend. It's at $80 million so far. I think this one's kind of a mixed message overall for Lionsgate. It did decently well out of the gate, especially the first couple of days, but it looked like that was a lot of fanboy audience, and it has tapered off dramatically after that. And I think it's doing pretty terrible internationally. I have to actually take a closer look to see what it was doing. Whoa, it's only done $47 million internationally. I don't know what's going on there. I wonder how many markets it's opened on. I gotta check that too. Oh, wow. It's it's opened on a lot of markets, a ton of them actually. They did a huge worldwide release. At least it looks like. I don't know. This is the loss, I think, at the end of the day. I don't think that they're gonna make another one of these. Unfortunately for the Power Rangers fans and the Lionsgate here, like I think they thought it was gonna be like a new universe, a new series of films, but I don't think that's gonna happen. It's definitely just shy of making decent money. It looks like a loss actually. From what I'm seeing. Anyway, that's Power Rangers. Kind of floppage, kind of half floppage, mild flop. Number 9 this last weekend was The Case for Christ, the Christian film, $2.7 million, 51% drop. 30% drop. I was looking at the wrong row here. It's the second weekend, $8.4 million total. I don't know. I thought this would do a lot better than this. I mean, how hard is it to get Christians in the theater on Easter weekend? I mean, Passion of the Christ, come on. So it didn't do very well. This is gone. Like, no one's going to see this movie now that Easter is over. So this is going to fly out of the box office here pretty soon. Number 10 was Kong Skull Island, 2.7 million, 51% drop. Which is okay because it lost 700 screens. Per theater average is not too well, 1,300. This one will be disappearing quite quickly. Overall take for Kong Skull Island was $161 million, which I think is okay. I thought it was going to do a lot more than that. Well, actually, no. I thought it was going to do about that. I thought anything over 150 was a win for Kong Skull Island, and it hit that mark. The budget was way too big, 185. So, they'll make money probably once it gets to streaming and VOD. They'll start seeing profit. But I think overall the theatrical run for it's okay. That's the top 10. A couple of things, other movies I want to mention that are coming in here outside the top 10. Ghost in the Shell did $2.4 million, a massive 66% drop. It lost 1,300 theaters. Only in its third weekend. Per theater average, just so the 66% drop is bad, but you could write that off and say, well, it lost 1,300 theaters, so yeah, it's going to go down by a ton. But when you look at the per theater average, it's only at about $1,100 in its third weekend. I mentioned this already. Deadline wrote about this film. This is going to lose $100 million. It's a huge flop, just a massive flop for Paramount. And there's Deadline does a fantastic job on breaking down exactly what happened. Who knows? I don't really know. My guess, based on what I saw, was that the marketing was very strong for this film. And from what I've heard critically, overall critically, it sort of scored okay. But from my favorite critics, they really thought it was a decent, good film to see. So critically, I don't think that was the problem. People talked about the sort of whitewashing of the main character, but even the writer of the series, or I guess the anime graphic novel, was like, well, it wasn't really, set in stone that it had to be an Asian main character. So I kind of feel like that's a red herring. I think overall there just wasn't a market for this film, which kind of makes me sad, because if this movie had come out when I was a teenager, like in the kind of late 90s, it would have done really well. It would have done at least, I want to say well north of 50, probably sub 100, but probably the 70, $80 million range. And I think what happened here is it got away from them. It's kind of a niche product for a niche group of people. And this stuff is just not mass appeal anymore for whatever reason, which is interesting because geek culture is so big now. You would think that this might do a little bit better than, say 10, 20 years ago. But here's the caveat to that is geek culture has become mass culture, right? So something like Guardians in the Galaxy, which is very poppy and very geeky, but also very pop mainstream oriented, that's going to do $180 million opening weekend or something crazy like that. Ghost in the Shell is like old school nerds, like I was, when geeks weren't mainstream at all. And I think it's just slice of the audience is just too small for this, and they put way too much money into that budget. Now, if you made this for 40, 50 million bucks, it might have done a lot better. But I think you maybe like even like a $20 million budget for this, if it was possible, that might be a good profit, a good product at the end of the day, a good ROI. But with that massive budget, I just don't see how they greenlit this thing. Number 12 is I want to mention too is The Zookeeper's Wife. This is a movie I've been a big backer of, and very similar to Gifted, smaller film. That kind of, it's definitely not a heartwarming message, but it has that sort of, I'm gonna go see this with my mom type feeling to it. Like it's like a family, a little more on the serious side, but kind of like a family film. And only did 2 million this weekend. Its per theater average is not great at 1,900 in its third weekend. It's only done $10.6 million overall. This feels like another wasted opportunity. Again, great trailer. Jessica Chastain looks phenomenal at it. It looked like a very rich, interesting, entertaining film, and they blew it. Focus just blew it. They didn't advertise it correctly. And there's a huge audience for this film, and none of those people are going to see it because $10.6 million so far in its third weekend is atrocious. There is no way this should have opened under $23 million in its opening weekend or mid-20s. It had that feel to it, like a big movie. And maybe audiences are changing enough. Like, you know, people younger than me, I don't know them that well. Like, I don't know what they're into, but it seems like this should be able to pull in, you know, this is a 4-quad film at the end of the day. And they didn't find a way to connect with the audiences, and no one went to go see it. It also had that weird kind of small wide release, like 1,000 theaters it's in now, and it's slowly adding. It added 250 this weekend, but like, what's the play there? Like, if you're only on 1,000 screens, like, I don't like the middle ground with that. Like, either do an art house release and never really go above 100 or a couple hundred, or go full on, put it out to 3,000 theaters and see what happens. Put out the 3,500 theaters and give it that marketing campaign. I think they would have made the cash back on this. I don't know. In any event, so that's mostly it for now. I don't think there's anything else. Oh, Colossal came out. I didn't even realize that had come out. That's a weird movie. It did 100 screens, 4,600 per theater. Basically did $500,000. I don't know where that movie's going. It's too weird for even me to see. But I think a really interesting weekend. You know, Fate of the Furious underperformed. There's no way around that. Internationally, I think it did very well, and that international money might sort of make up the gap on its shortcomings here domestically. But it's a fascinating sort of underperformance by that film. What does it say about the series and where that series is going? If it's, you know, dropped all the way, if those numbers dropped, you know, $50 million opening weekend, it's going to make well over $100 million less than the last installment. That $100 million was probably counted on by somebody in the Universal accounting team, right? So it's like they're gonna have to find a way to sort of figure out where that series goes. Next weekend, or sort of this weekend, coming up in a couple or a few days, a lot of stuff is opening. Free Fire, small little A24 film, looks really cool. Shitty marketing again. I don't know how that's going to do. Probably not very well. Things Forgotten. I have no idea what that is. I was out in Los Angeles last week and I saw like posters of it everywhere. They were intriguing, but the distribution company doesn't really know what they're doing or something, because no one's going to see that. The Promise. I don't even know what that is. What the hell is The Promise? How do I not know this? Oh, The Promise is the Christian Bale, Oscar Isaac movie about the Armenian genocide. I don't know how that got made. No offense to the historical events or whatever, but I'm just not sure who thought that was a good idea. And to release it on 2,200 screens, it's Open Road Films again, so they're supposed to be making like unique content for VOD, is what somebody told me. because they're kind of like a joint operation between distributors and studios, or is it just Regal or something? I can't remember. So I don't know. It's a weird product to put out there. I don't get it. Unforgettable is my little movie that I think fingers crossed will break out, because Katherine Heigl has not had a hit in forever. Her TV show got canceled after like 2 episodes aired. I have a hope that she's going to make a comeback in this ridiculous sort of sex thriller that Warner Brothers is putting out this weekend. So I have high hopes for that one, but let's be honest, it's probably not going to make more than 10 million. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast. I'll be back next week. Take care.